You're tuned in to the Bleav in Arizona podcast. Hello, Bear Down Believers, and welcome in to the debut edition of the show. You could say you were there from the beginning. You were one of the first listeners to the Bleav in Arizona podcast. I'm your host, Matt Reynoldson, and we'll be getting together a few times a week to discuss everything U of A athletics. No longer U Arizona, none of that. It's U of A all the way. Bear down. A little background on me. I'm the former sports director at the Tucson NBC station, KVOA, and now super proud to be joining the Bleav Podcast Network to continue doing what I love, and that's covering the Cats, being on the front lines, doing those interviews, getting the inside information for you, the listeners and viewers, all our great subscribers at Bleav. You can check out any of the shows of any of the teams, all leagues. That's what Bleav wants to be. Check them out on their YouTube page, BLEAV, any of the shows there. And then obviously on Bleav.com, wherever you get your podcasts as well. You can search it on their website or on Spotify, Apple Music, Bleav in Arizona with Matt Reynoldson. So happy to be here with you. All these YouTube videos will be uploaded on my YouTube page at Matt_Reynoldson. You can follow me on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Matt_Reynoldson. All right, enough shameless self-promotion. It's time to talk Wildcats. That's what we're here to do. And let's talk about the biggest storyline going on in U of A athletics right now, and that's the transition to the Big 12 Conference. As of, checks the calendar, 18 days ago, Arizona is an official member of a new conference for the first time in more than 4 decades. Kind of hard to believe. It really is kind of hard to believe. But here we are. Arizona starting on this new venture, abandoning those 4 decades of history in the Pac-12. And before you think that I'm going to go on this crusade saying the Pac-12 was better, saying that there was a better fit, and lamenting the demise of this conference, look at the title of this video. Look at the title of this podcast. It's Why Arizona is a Better Fit for the Big 12 than the Pac-12. Than it ever was the Pac-12, perhaps. Definitely in recent history. And no, I'm not talking about the Pac-2 right now. Obviously, Arizona is a better fit for the Big 12 than it is just staying on stranded island with Oregon State and Washington State. Here's hoping for those fan bases that they can get back to some semblance of Power 4 competition. Could be Power 3, could be Power 5, whenever it comes. But no, I'm not talking about the current Pac-12. I'm talking about the most recent Pac-12. Give it 10 years, give it 15 years. Arizona is a better fit for the Big 12 Conference. I think the four corner schools, to some extent, all are. I'd say Utah probably fits the bill as much as Arizona does, even though Utah really pushed back against going to the Big 12. But there are 5 main reasons why the U of A is such a strong fit in the Big 12 and why it makes more sense than the Pac-12. We'll go through all 5 reasons in this podcast. We'll do what we always do at the end of the show. I'm starting a new tradition at the end of the show called the Bear Down Rundown. Tell you a little water cooler talk, what you need to know about U of A, around the headlines, getting some other sports, their spotlights. Today we'll talk baseball, little draft picks. Baseball is another one of those reasons why Arizona is a better fit in the Big 12 than the Pac-12, but let's get to the first reason. And the first reason is you. Yeah, that sounds a little pandering. No, it is you. It's the fans. It's Tucson. It's Southern Arizona. This fan base is different. This fan base shows like the Big 12 does. And it fits better. How many times has Arizona gone into a game in Palo Alto, in Berkeley? How about Pullman? Even Corvallis sometimes. No shade to Oregon State. How about football games in the Rose Bowl? UCLA is a little sleepy. Arizona's a better fit for these teams, these conferences. This conference. This group of fans that care so much. That's the lifeblood of their towns, their college towns. Tucson is a college town. It's great. It's a wonderful city in and of itself. Wonderful region, Southern Arizona. But the sports, Tucson is built as a college town. Tucson is built around the U of A. And what can you say the same about for all the other Big 12 cities? Or most of the other Big 12 cities? What can you say about Stillwater, college town, Lawrence, college town, Ames, Waco? These schools, Provo, I've been to a lot of them. Look, I grew up in Big 12 country. It is different. Fall. The week revolves around Saturday. The week revolves around the tailgate. The week revolves around being able to support your team on Saturdays. How about through the winter? What are you doing on a Monday night? You're going to go pack an arena. You're going to be a little tired for work the next day, but you're going to pack an arena and lose your voice. This is what we do. This is what fandom is. And the Big 12 represents fandom so much better than the Pac-12 ever did. The Pac-12 couldn't fill arenas. The Pac-12 couldn't get enough interest to draw a real TV contract. Blame George Kliavkoff all you want. But that Apple TV contract, that Apple TV deal, was a direct result of lack of interest, of lack of butts in seats. It's an eyesore for television to see half-empty football fields, half-empty football stadiums, half-empty arenas. The tertiary sports, if you will. Baseball, some empty ballparks. Volleyball, some empty gyms. Just not a great look, but the Big 12 fits it so much better. It's like a breath of fresh air. If you're going to Lawrence, you're going to Lubbock. Oh my goodness. They're on top of you. These road environments, these fans, the interest, the diehard nature so closely reflects what I've learned about the U of A, what I've seen from the U of A, how I've interacted with Wildcat fans. People care. And some local media that have been here a long time will tell you that it's a little bit of a come in when the water's warm city. I don't think so. I'm going to give you more credit than that. Because there is always interest. There is always a diehard interest, whether it's July, whether it's in the middle of March. U of A basketball. See what happened during the win streak last year in football? The amount of interest, the amount of mania around the football team that pulled off 4 straight top 25 wins. I mean, there was a real surge in this city towards the Wildcats. And that propelled the U of A to winning 7 straight games to end last season. They were a wagon by the end of it. They picked off Jackson Arnold, 4 or 5 times in the Alamo Bowl? Jackson Arnold's a 5-star quarterback for Oklahoma. He's going to start this year in the SEC. Arizona turned him over 5 times. The U of A support did that. Arizona having almost the crowd advantage in San Antonio. That's the shadow of OU. You know how many OU fans there are in Texas? Arizona almost outnumbered them in San Antonio. The fan support, the hunger to be good, everything around this university reflects what the Big 12 has shown for a long time. Kansas basketball diehards around the country. Kansas football fans show up when they're good, which is pretty rare. Iowa State, Hilton Magic. Lubbock, one of the toughest places to play in the entire country in basketball. West Virginia, just those fans tower over you. Go to a football game day in Morgantown, West Virginia, and you'll see what it's all about. Space City, Orlando, UCF, one of the biggest student bodies in the entire country. Not so much of a commuter school. They show up. They show up to football games and sit on top of you and yell and scream. That's going to be a tough road environment for Arizona football this year. This is a conference that reflects the caring and the interest and the embracing of their teams. And it's so cool to see Arizona finally be in lockstep with that. We saw it at Big 12 Media Days last week. It looked and felt like a fit. It looked and felt like Arizona was walking into something that they had been a part of for a long time. walking into a group of teams, a group of schools that are so desiring to see their programs rise to the next level. The leaders in the conference and the bottom of the conference, it feels like they can just flip-flop at any time. This is not the Big Ten or the SEC, where there are also rans like Rutgers, Vanderbilt, a clear bottom of the conference. No, this cycles all the way through. It's a lot of schools with that same sort of passion. And the Four Corner schools adding to this conference reflect that. And I think the U of A is the flagship of the new additions. Brett Yormark, the commissioner, he said as much too.
There has never been a better time than right now to be part of the Big 12. We are truly a national conference in 10 states, 4 time zones. And all eyes are now on the Big 12 for all the right reasons. And I think it's safe to say we are more relevant now than ever before.
Pretty cool to go to a place where you're wanted and go to a place where, to steal a Cheers reference, where everybody knows your name. All right, the next reason Arizona is a better fit for the Big 12 than the Pac-12 is really kind of on the flip side of the last one, and it's being on an even playing field with NIL and funding. Arizona fans are so good about giving to NIL and giving to make sure these athletes are well compensated and stay, whether that's for competitive reasons or just for the the altruistic reasons of wanting players to be compensated for putting in the hard work for the school they support. I get all reasons for that, but if you look at the Pac-12, that was a bit of a tough landscape when it came to NIL because you were never going to match the power brokers. Oregon, Phil Knight, and Nike have unlimited NIL resources, which is almost impossible to conceptualize. I mean, unlimited NIL resources. I know Nike has more money than anyone, but that's crazy to think about. And Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, the owner of Nike, obviously a great philanthropist as well, but he is a diehard Duck fan. And so that was always going to raise Oregon above the level of everybody else in that conference. USC's got a lot of money power in LA. They show it. They flex it. Now they're at that $12 million to $13 million mark as far as, NIL revenue. So maybe that may not put them top of the Big Ten, but it was top of the West Coast outside of Oregon. Certainly dominating that Southern California bubble. If you go look at the facilities at USC, go look at those facilities in downtown LA, you'll see that they've got some real spending power there. It's not an even playing field. They've got the ability to go get 5-star quarterback after 5-star quarterback after 5-star quarterback and pay them as such. Caleb Williams, the number 1 draft pick, transferred there from Oklahoma. Came out of there. He was making a lot of NIL money. They pulled the number 1 defensive transfer last year in Bear Alexander, pulling him away from Georgia in the transfer portal. You think they do that without NIL money? Arizona going away from the Pac-12, and I know there's only 2 examples, but I don't think Arizona was third. Washington has its well-documented challenges with NIL, as does UCLA, but those are a couple universities with maybe a little more spending power. I think Utah has a pretty good NIL situation. So it just didn't really fit from the spending power standpoint for Arizona in the Pac-12. How about this? Let's extrapolate this now to the Big 12. Where does Arizona fit in the Big 12 as far as NIL and funding? And the answer is right at the top, but not too high. Of the top 30 schools, according to NIL-NCAA.com, there are 30 schools with more NIL contributions, more donations, than any Big 12 school. Let me repeat that. 30 schools in college sports, 30 schools in college football, college basketball, probably the 2 biggest NIL contributions, 30 schools that have more NIL funding than the top Big 12 school. And then when you look at those Big 12 schools stacked right up right there, Iowa State, Kansas, Utah, Arizona, Texas Tech, they're all right there in the middle of that. You know what that means? There's not a huge barrier to entry. There's not a huge barrier to getting at the top. You don't have to spend the money you don't have. Arizona doesn't have to dig for random rich donors or apparel company owners. They're right there, which means you can win this conference at any time, which in football means you're getting an automatic berth to the playoff and a top 4 seed. You get a top 4 seed, maybe there's a little 5-12 upset. Maybe you're playing a 12 seed, a group of 5 team, second round. Call it the Cotton Bowl or something like that. Then you're looking at a potential college football playoff semifinal berth. It all comes down to the resources. You don't have to be at the Ohio State, the Georgia level, the Texas level, A&M, Michigan. You don't have to be one of these schools that's the heavy hitters in NIL. Not in the Big 12, you don't. Not in this Big 12. Of the schools in the Big 12, none of them are in the top 30 in funding, which I think really creates an opportunity for Arizona to get to the top of that level. And even if they're not at the top of that level, they're not far behind. They're not far behind. So when it comes to paying for a quarterback, when it comes to paying for that strong wing in the portal, yeah, it'll always come down to relationships first. It'll always come down to fit. But in today's version of college sports, it comes down to the bag as well. And Arizona can offer that bag as well as anybody in the Big 12 conference, which I Bleav is a competitive balancer and something that'll keep Arizona athletics viable in this new league for a very long time. At least until the league expands. And even then, Arizona is built to be viable. Even then, Arizona has a head start on the potential new teams that may be coming into this conference. So that's a big step. It's a big step when it comes to recruiting Texas. You're not going to get the players that go to UT. You're not going to get the 5-star left tackle, 5-star quarterback. But we've seen Arizona football coach Brent Brennan start to dip into Texas for recruiting, stay dipping into California for recruiting. What about those Big 12 level players? What about those strong 4-stars that were overlooked by the UTs and the Texas A&Ms, the SEC schools that were raiding the Dallas, Fort Worth area, the Houston metro? What about the guys that were overlooked by them? How about dipping into Southern California? Arizona's beaten USC in some recruiting battles. How do those recruiting battles change now that those kids can go to Arizona and have a lot of games out west every year? In the Big Ten, those kids won't be able to have their families come watch a lot of times because outside of the home games, they're going to get what? Maybe one road West Coast game per year, maybe 2 if they're lucky. Arizona's keeping it all down here in this region. They're dipping into Texas. They have a foothold in Arizona. They're beating ASU for recruits in basketball and football. They're beating a lot of these Southern California recruiters for the good prospects. We've seen it all the time in basketball. Arizona's a powerhouse, probably the powerhouse of the West Coast in basketball. Certainly eclipsed UCLA in that front, at least lately. So when it comes to NIL and having that level playing field, when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to getting the players that make your programs viable and bordering on elite, Arizona's right there at the top of the Big 12, which is why I think it's a really good fit. All right, my third of 5 reasons why Arizona is a better fit for the Big 12 than the Pac-12 comes to us very recently. We had football media days last week. It's football. The football landscape in the Big 12 so much better fits Arizona than does the Pac-12. Let me rephrase that just in case I phrased it wrong. The football landscape in the Big 12 much better fits Arizona than the Pac-12 does. I mean, look, we talked about the stadiums, how Arizona fills the stadium when things are going well, how Arizona never really dips below that 40,000 mark, which would be about 80%, somewhere that range of Arizona Stadium. You can't say the same about Stanford. Can't say the same about Cal. Can't say the same about Wazoo, Oregon State, UCLA. I'm going to stay away from doing side swipes on the other new Big 12 schools. ASU fills it when they're good. Colorado obviously has a ton of momentum right now. We'll save my actual thoughts on that for another podcast. Utah has a great home attendance record. But, the other Pac-12 schools left a lot to be desired as far as football interest, football attendance. And also, when things were going well, okay, let's do a little exercise here. Let's talk about the Pac-12, the last year's version of the Pac-12, of ceilings when everything's going right. Where does Arizona stack up in that pecking order? Well, Washington went to the national championship game last year. A great quarterback in Michael Penix, who was a Heisman candidate, top 10 draft pick. Great wide receiver in Rome Odunze, top 10 draft pick. Jalen Polk, another great player. They had dudes. They had absolute dudes. And oh yeah, the coach that took probably the best opening in college football in the Alabama job. Kalen DeBoer was one heck of a coach. So there's Washington. No question them at their peak are above Arizona. Oregon, yeah. Even Oregon with a new quarterback this year. Transfer Dylan Gabriel. Yeah, they're right up there. They're loaded. They recruit extremely well. They got dudes on the lines. They punish you in the trenches. They run the football. They got athletes everywhere. Oregon's the gold standard. USC, when things are going well, they're going to score a lot of points. And when things are going really well, it's going to look like the mid-2000s. Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush. National titles. Vacated national titles. USC, when they're rolling, is really good. UCLA, when they're rolling, also really darn good. And really hard to eclipse. They're still in LA. They play in the Rose Bowl. They don't have the funding that USC does, but they've got some power brokers there. The Bruins have some absolute power brokers. So when things are going well for UCLA, yeah, I'd put UCLA's peak above Arizona's peak in that realm. Stanford, under Jim Harbaugh, David Shaw, Arizona hasn't gotten to that level. Now, Arizona has well eclipsed Stanford now. But let's keep it going in the mid-2000s. I mean, Cal with Jeff Tedford and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that was a team. I think they got up to number 2 in the country during those mid-2000s. Cal's peak a lot of times is bigger than Arizona's. But I'll give Arizona the edge over Stanford and Cal just because I think it's a more stable environment. The bottom line is, though, there were a lot of barriers to being really good in the Pac-12. I don't see those barriers in the Big 12. I see teams that all sort of reflect what Arizona reflects to me as a lifelong college football fan. I see Arizona as an opportunist. Let me explain that. Arizona has an opportunity to be extremely viable in the college football playoff era. But you know what? I'm just going to say it. In the BCS system, there's zero chance Arizona was ever going to make a national championship game. If the 4-team playoff had stayed, I would put there a very slim chance that Arizona would ever make the college football playoff. Why? It's political. It just is. I mean, that's how they built it. They built it as the subjective 4 best teams, and that's why we saw an undefeated Florida State team left out of the playoff because their quarterback got hurt. It's not objective, it's subjective. So what does the expansion to 12 do? It makes things more objective. It makes it impossible to ignore the Big 12. So there's mark one for the Big 12 as far as why Arizona is a good fit for football there. The other one is there's no giant at the top of this conference. You look at the strong teams in this league, they've all been chasing Texas and Oklahoma for years. And now Oklahoma State and TCU see opportunities, big opportunities to rise to the top of the conference. Utah's coming in as one of the league favorites. Arizona's coming in as one of the league favorites. Kansas is going to be extremely viable this year. West Virginia, good quarterback play. Iowa State, good quarterback play. These are teams that all see themselves jockeying for that top spot. And then when you turn the rosters over to 2025, and I'm not ignoring 2024, but let's turn the rosters over hypothetically to 2025. Is there anybody that really stands in the way of the U of A that you're like, that's probably a loss? Or that's definitely a loss? You look at the conference schedule, there is no Ohio State. There is no Alabama. There is no Georgia. There is no USC. There's no Oregon. There's no game that you look at on the schedule where you say, underdog is going to take their shot. No. Every time you step on that field, you have a chance to win in the Big 12 football conference. Arizona has a chance to be one of the top teams year in and year out under Brent Brennan. A lot of that is because of the roster they brought back. I mean, these guys from Servite, Orange County, and the Servite crew, Noah Fafita, Teteroa McMillan, Jacob Manu, Kean Burnett. Those are dudes. Those are dudes that can play high-level college football anywhere in the country. They chose Arizona. They chose to stay at Arizona, which was huge. But this recruiting class could set the foundation for the entire future of Arizona in the Big 12, because what happens when you win? You get more players that want to come and join a winning program. And then they win. And then they win. And let's bring this all the way circling back around to the college football playoff. What does the Big 12 champion get? Let's just say the Big 10 and the SEC get the 1 and 2 seed in the playoff. What does the Big 12 champion get? Probably, at this point, looking at where the ACC is, probably the 3 seed. How would it look to see Arizona as a number 3 seed? Let's project this out to win the playoff is 14 teams, because they would have a 3 seed as a bye if they had that this year. 3 seed or a 4 seed, they would have a bye in the first round. Let's project it out to when it's 14 teams. I think it's next year. I think it's almost finalized. When it's 14 teams, Arizona has the 3 seed. That's a home game at Arizona Stadium in the playoff against throw your dart at the board. Alabama? Penn State? Maybe a Georgia or Ohio State? Maybe a Clemson? One of these other great teams? Maybe an Oregon? I think there's been a few memorable moments where Oregon's come into Arizona Stadium, come into Tucson, late night in the desert, and walked out with an L. Scooby Wright may have something to say about that. But this is a conference that gives you that opportunity. As long as you have a seat at the table in the college football playoff, which the Big 12 does, and the Big 12 is strengthening its seat at this table, Arizona has a shot to be sitting in that seat year over year. Not just a flash in the pan. Not just for as long as number 11 and number 4, Noah Fafita and Teteroa McMillan, are on the field, are tearing up the turf over there. No, they have a chance to have a seat at the table every single year, which I think is so exciting. No barriers for entry, no conference favorites, no runaway heavyweight superpower that you have to contend with. No, everybody has a chance. And the parity makes it just so exciting on the football field and makes Arizona a great fit for this league. My fourth reason why Arizona is a better fit for the Big 12 than the Pac-12, and I can't wait to discuss this one, it's basketball. And when the conference schedule came out, I was a little disappointed that Arizona didn't get a home and home with Kansas. Just one game this year between UA and KU. That's at Fog Allen Fieldhouse in Lawrence. But my goodness, this conference is going to be insane. Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark said it last week at Big 12 Media Days that this is head and shoulders far and away the best basketball conference in the entire country. And I want to bring it back to our earlier discussion about the fans, because I talked a lot about basketball arenas in there. I'm just going to go through all these basketball arenas that are just incredible to play in. You get ASU, you get the Territorial Cup. That always has a little extra juice, especially when it's on a weekend. Going up, playing up there in Tempe at Desert Financial Arena. There's a little juice to that arena. All right, let's put that one aside. Utah, Colorado, the toughest road swing in the Pac-12. Now it's going to be a tough road swing in the Big 12. Playing at elevation, playing in front of all those fans in Boulder, playing in front of all those fans in Salt Lake City. It's tough out. They pack those arenas. They get loud. Arizona had a triple overtime classic with the Utes last year in Salt Lake. That's a fun atmosphere. And then we go to the rest of the conference. My goodness, are these fun matchups. Iowa State was a 3 seed last year. Have one of the best sophomores in the country coming back in Milan Momcilovic. Covered him in high school in Wisconsin. He's a stud. Hilton Magic. Always tough to win in Ames. Hilton Coliseum is one of the toughest environments out there. All right, how about KU? I don't need to delve too much into KU, but I will anyway. It's a preseason top 5 team. They've got Hunter Dickinson coming back. They've got the toughest place to play in college basketball, outside of McHale, of course. Fog Allen Fieldhouse, James Naismith Court, loaded with college basketball history. It's beautiful. It makes me, as a history nostalgic, excited about the battles that'll take place there. About Arizona and Kansas probably playing on a Saturday at some point this season in Lawrence. The eyes of the college basketball world locked in on that. Could it be more exciting? Oklahoma State has had fun runs in basketball. Gosh, they're a fun team. Fun program. They've been viable. They've been a 5 seed a couple times. Can they get to that elite level? They'll probably be middle of the pack, maybe lower in this conference, just because of the depth of the top. We go down into Texas, TCU. Oh, that's a tough place to go play. They were a 6 seed last year. It was a tough place to go win a basketball game. The crowd decked out in purple, loud, kind of towers over you. Let's rock it out west. Texas Tech. Oh my goodness. An unbelievable home court advantage. Probably the best student section in college basketball. They take up half the arena there in Lubbock. It's unbelievable. They have been a really strong program going back to when Chris Beard was there. Obviously, he left for Texas and then had the personal and the legal issues. But my goodness, Texas Tech is a power and will be a tough out. They will be a tough out every time. Houston. My goodness, Kelvin Sampson knows how to coach some defense, knows how to coach some players. Jamal Shedd doesn't get hurt last year. It's probably a Final Four team. Maybe even plays UConn in the national championship. A healthy Houston is a monster. Right at the top of the country every single year in defensive efficiency. They're churning out athletes like LJ Cryer, Jamal Shedd. I mean, this program is a tough out. No longer Group of 5 Houston. They are Big 12 Houston. And they're a force. They own this conference now. They won the conference last year. They deserve to win it. They're a beast. And Houston is always going to be a tough out. They got a home and home with Arizona this year. That'll be fun. That'll be a lot of fun. How about Baylor? Up there in Waco. Man, Scott Drew knows how to coach. Turned down an overture from Kentucky this year. I mean, his teams are always fundamentally sound, athletic, can shoot, make smart decisions, and pound you on the glass. Can you imagine a road swing to TCU and Baylor? You sneak out of Fort Worth with a win, then you got to go down to Waco, get your butt whooped for 40 minutes. Might come out with a win, but you're going to feel it the next morning. That Texas group of teams is a bear. Let's go out east. Cincinnati. Huh. Cincinnati, going back to the Mick Cronin days, is just a bear to play against. They play tough defense. They have athletes. They have dudes. I mean, that is a team that is going to knock a ton of teams off every single year. I don't know how the heck they're going to find. How many bids is this conference going to find each year? Because then you go out a little further east to West Virginia. We've talked about Morgantown. We talked about Morgantown from the football sense. The best tailgate cities in the country. Great home field football advantage. But guess what? I know Bob Huggins isn't there anymore, but they can play ball. Every single year, West Virginia has that standard. West Virginia pulls a lot of players from the Philadelphia area, the Pittsburgh area, even the Philadelphia area. They have that little haven just inland from the East Coast where they can pull a lot of guys, recruit nationally. And last year we saw Arizona transfer Kirk Kriisa end up there. They'll always have players. They'll always be able to cycle through and be a strong program. West Virginia's built themselves into that. And then UCF. UCF is, again, one of the toughest places to play. Not to mention, you're going across the country. We're talking 2,000-3,000 miles out to Orlando from Tucson. That's a long trip. A long road to get out to UCF to play a game where the students are on top of you. Once again, one of the largest student bodies in the entire country. So that's a tough place to play. And all of this boiling down to the fact that Arizona is going to have 0 nights off in the Big 12. That's what's so fun about this. I didn't even mention Provo. I mean, going up and playing in the elevation at BYU. BYU was a 6th seed last year in the tournament. Got knocked off, but I mean, this Big 12 conference is absolutely loaded, and Arizona is going to have its hands full every night. And how annoying was it over the years for you, the Arizona fan? And I want to hear from you on this because I think it was annoying. But to be head and shoulders the best team in the conference, and you're just kind of riding out the Pac-12 schedule. You're kind of riding out that Friday, Sunday, or the occasional Wednesday, Saturday. And you look at the schedule and you're buying tickets and you maybe you live in Phoenix or maybe you live, elsewhere in the Southwest and you have one weekend that you're going to go to McHale. You say, well, okay, so get the tickets, plan the trip, everything like that. Not this weekend, boring. Not this weekend, boring. Not this weekend, boring. And this one's good, but it's a 9 p.m. tip. 9 p.m. local time tip. What are we doing? Big 12 doesn't do that. Big 12 gets the spotlight. No longer is Arizona going in to the NCAA tournament in March, going into conference tournament time as an unknown commodity. No longer do we have to see Arizona, and they did well this year, but no longer will we see Arizona put together the most brutal non-conference schedule in college basketball just to offset a terrible conference slate. They don't have to do that anymore because they're playing at minimum 8 top 25 opponents in conference. I think that's conservative. Maybe 10. I mean, the conference schedule is going to be absolutely insane. And it's incredible. I love sports. I want to watch that. I love watching and covering the Wildcats. I want to see great matchups. And no longer will we go from late December to the middle of March not watching Arizona play a team with a lot of juice. No longer will the guys have to just get up for a Thursday night in Corvallis and fall on a buzzer beater to a terrible Oregon State team because they were asleep at the wheel. There's no asleep at the wheel in the Big 12. You win or you lose based on what you put on the floor that night. Nobody's sneaking up on anybody. And it's just going to be so fun to watch. So fun to watch for Arizona basketball. Men's and women's too. And women's basketball kind of rolls me into my final reason why Arizona is a better fit for the Big 12 than the Pac-12 is the Olympic sports. I mean, women's basketball is a great example of this. I mean, Baylor is a really good program, but we saw Arizona not really fit into the conversation in the Pac-12 this past year because it was by far and away the best conference in women's college basketball. And lo and behold, they make a late season run with one of the youngest teams in the sport and earn an NCAA tournament berth. But they were getting buried by UCLA, by Juju Watkins and USC. I mean, there were just tough outs all over the conference. Stanford, a 1 seed. Cal was tough. Arizona beat them twice. But I mean, every team that they played throughout the year was just brutally tough. Utah, top 15 team. Colorado, a top 5 team most of the year. Washington State, when they had their star, was tough. And now Arizona goes into the Big 12 and takes a little bit of a breath and gives head coach Adia Barnes an opportunity to schedule some marquee non-conference opponents, knowing that they're not facing this juggernaut conference in the Pac-12 year in and year out. Kansas State had a good year last year. Colorado obviously had a good year last year. Kansas is usually viable. But outside of Baylor, and Baylor wasn't even that good last year and hasn't been really nationally powerful for a little bit. Outside of Baylor, I mean, name me a team in the Big 12 that you look at and you say it's a definite loss for Arizona women's basketball. And this is going into a perfect time for this program where over the next 2 years, especially if players stay, with the core they have of one of the top recruiting classes in the nation that they pulled last year, and a lot of those players playing as freshmen, where they can start to ascend to the top of women's college basketball, build their confidence, and make potentially another Final Four run, maybe another national finalist run like they did in 2021. Maybe. Because there are very few barriers, just like football, there are very few barriers to the top of this conference. And if you want a young team that's still growing together to build their confidence, this is the conference to do it in. The U of A has and sponsors more sports than any other school in the Big 12. But I Bleav, especially because of the outgoing influence of Texas and Oklahoma, that there is an emphasis on Olympic sports that exists in the Big 12 that you can't ignore, and that provides Arizona as much support and more in a lot of cases than the Pac-12 did. I think the opportunity to have so many of those games and matches and meets available on ESPN Plus, which is what the Big 12 contract calls for, is an opportunity to bring things full circle, to bring it to a wider audience, and to continue to grow these programs in Arizona. Because the U of A has a proud history of Olympic sports, from golf to gymnastics to swimming to track and field, you name it. A proud history of Olympic sports that I think will continue to thrive in the Big 12. All right, before we wrap up here on the show, I want to do something that we'll do every single time here on the Bleav in Arizona podcast, and that's the Bear Down Rundown, giving you a little insight into other things you need to know around the U of A for a little water cooler talk. And today our focus is Arizona baseball, with 4 players drafted in the Major League Baseball draft this week. The first, Jackson Kent, the left-handed Friday night starter, going in the 4th round to the Washington Nationals. He was followed later in the 4th round by Clark Candiotti. In the 8th round, Tonko Susak went, and then in the 20th round, Cam Walty. So that's 4 Arizona pitchers that went in the Major League Baseball draft, and I think that's a huge credit to Kevin Vance, the Arizona pitching coach, doing a masterful job this year with the starting rotation. All three weekend starters were drafted. Tonko obviously started the year in a starting role and then kind of worked his way into that closer role, worked his way into a strong reliever role. He went in the 8th round. A little surprising, I think, to see him go there, but he'll have a good career and be able to progress through the minors pretty well. But what a job by Kevin Vance to really turn around this pitching staff coming in his first year here from Boston College. Really impressive job to transform this staff into guys that attack the strike zone. I talked to him mid-season and he said his philosophy was 0-2, 1-2, or die trying. Let me repeat that. 0-2 meaning 0 balls, 2 strikes, 1-2, 1 ball, 2 strikes, or die trying, which means every single time they're attacking the strike zone with every batter, which means batters can't take pitches off. Batters can't think, oh, okay, he's just going to throw this one high or going to try and get me to chase one in the dirt. No, they are attacking every batter, which keeps hitters off balance and really created a great team ERA this year. One of the best Arizona pitching staffs we've seen in recent memory. Obviously, this program has always been able to hit, save for June this year, unfortunately. But this program has always been pretty good at the plate. But now with Kevin Vance at the helm as pitching coach, I think that this team will really start to churn out some strong pitchers. And there's a lot to replace coming up next year, the entire weekend rotation. But I have no doubt that Chip Hale and Kevin Vance will be able to do that and be able to develop some strong starting pitching to get behind the good bats. And hopefully another great year for Arizona baseball and their maiden voyage into the Big 12. How do you feel about Arizona's overall voyage into the Big 12? You can comment underneath this YouTube video. This will be uploaded at Matt_Reynoldson on YouTube, or just tweet at me at Matt_Reynoldson. I know I had a lot of opinions here on the move to the Big 12. I'm excited. Things officially start up with fall camp for football here in a couple weeks, so we'll be there for that. Basketball coming up soon. So many other sports at the U of A. I'm excited to talk with them and with you about them all through this entire process. So thank you so much for being here for our debut edition of the Bleav in Arizona podcast. Once again, I'm Matt Reynoldson. We'll see you next time.